Okay, good evening, everybody. It is 5 o'clock. This is our start time. Before we begin, I just want to say that today was one of my most favorite days of the year. When I drove to work this morning, I was driving down the interstate and I saw the green was just starting to pop on all the trees. And when I drove home just now, the leaves have really popped. One of my favorite things observing every spring is when the trees come back to life and ground slowly turns to green. So that's awesome. Before we begin, would anybody care to make a public comment? Anybody online? Hearing none, seeing none. Oh, we do have a chat.
Videos on. There we go.
What's in the chat? Do we?
Yeah, we just turn the video on.
Oh, okay.
So corrected.
So, Josh, board, any additions or deletions to tonight's agenda? Okay, moving right along. Staffing update. We have news. You want to take this, Josh?
So Alan Carpenter continues to serve as the interim water and wastewater superintendent. We have not received any additional applications for the full-time position since we had a few in the late fall, early winter of last year. When we put Alan in charge as a certified wastewater operator with the state, they have a 6-month basically grace period where if you don't have the proper licensing, you're able to run the facility without the proper license. That's coming to a close here in April. I've reached out to the state about that and also looked into 2 options for companies that can provide that coverage. So I've got a draft agreement in from VTOMS as well as Simon Services. Both are able to provide the services. They can both do a month to month so that if Alan is able to get his license, then we can scale back with them. I sent the low cost one to the state just to have them review to make sure that it gets everything that we need to make sure that we're in compliance. And I also asked both of them, once Alan is able to achieve his license, could we keep them on for questions, beyond the service time? And they said we'd both be willing to do that. Another advantage of this is that I asked 2 about training. They both said, we're talking about a company that would come in. Yeah, sorry, I didn't know when you came in. They both said that, they're required to be here 8 hours per week. And during that time, they would have no problem kind of bringing in all staff to say, all right, here's how we're doing things. Here's why we're doing it. We're trying to talk about training for you and Brad. I think that would be helpful. And then they're also in their monthly fee available for calls. So if something comes up and staff says, we need to call somebody to figure this out, you can call them over the phone. It's included in the fee. If they have to mobilize and come out because it's an emergency of some sort, there's additional fees for that. I think that's also nice to know we've got somebody there for that too. So I think this could help us out even beyond when Alan's able to obtain the licensing.
Thank you, Josh. Any questions for Jay? Go ahead.
Is there how soon is he entitled or able to retake the exam? Is there a limit on retakes?
Yeah, I think there's like a 30-day wait. I think it is in between 30. I think it's
30 days wait, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think if it takes 6 in a row, they'll make it. Then they can move it out like 3 or 4 months or something.
So he continues to be pretty aggressive with keeping it every 30 days. He goes and takes it, and he doesn't miss. He misses it by like a point or 2, which is
literally
I'm sure
by that much.
Literally by that much, which I'm sure is more frustrating for Alan than anybody. He wants to get it fast.
Okay. Any questions? I want to pass along my appreciation. I was doing my nightly walk through the park, and well, I was enjoying the nice weather. Some of our employees were hard at work at the plant all weekend, so thank you.
Nice looking stairs.
They are.
No pallets.
So do we have some pallets we need to get rid of now?
We cut them up and they're all gone.
Okay.
That was the first process.
Okay, are we ready to jump into review of the Q3 financials? Let's begin the review of the Q3 financials. I want to start with water.
Sure. So in the packet, there's a number of things. There's the budget status report for water and for wastewater. We've made some notes in the margins on each one of those, just if anybody has questions or why some might be a little over, a little under. We've also included the water and sewer septage financials, bank balance history, septage revenues. You'll notice on this version, we took the expense side out of the septage revenue that we talked about last time. It's not a really great measurement of expenses on septage, so but we still felt that looking at the history as far as well as where we are today, septage for revenues is helpful. Have a look at delinquencies, reserve account balances, and then the debt schedule for both water and wastewater is also included. So as expected, we're a bit, under in salaries, and then over in some of the repair items, especially in the wastewater side.
Now, as far as repairs on the wastewater side, we're not expecting any huge big ticket items ahead of the 20-year evaluation.
We've got a couple that we
Want
want
to talk about that when we get there?
Yeah, we are going to review some budgetary things going forward.
Okay.
I thought you had a line for repair status and stuff we can talk about.
We do,
there.
yeah.
Yeah, I put that at the bottom of the budget just to talk about some things that, and I should have pulled up what we talked about, but if you remember,
The only anticipated large cost that we foresee right now is cleaning the plant now.
Cleaning as far as,
Solids. that are-
okay, in the septage tank?
Well, throughout the whole plant.
Okay,
I made a bid, proposal and sent it out to 3 people, 3 different businesses, and it amounts to over 180 cubic yards of material that we're gonna have to get disposed of. And the cost of the disposal of that is
you come to the mic, sorry.
Disposal costs than that, just getting rid of the material, not them getting it out, is in the 20,000 range, I think. Vitums is one of the companies, and they may be able to make a deal with Montpelier, and that would be a cheaper disposal cost, but nobody has gotten back to me yet. I called them today, and they were dealing with a water main break in Bristol.
Like $120 a cubic yard then.
Yeah, pretty close. I mean, it's some of the. It's gotta go to Coventry. And be dried. Casella wants to be put in dumpsters and then have a drying out period. Vitums thought that they could dispose of it and had already talked to Montpelier that they would be willing to take it in a liquid form. And so it would be a matter of sucking it out, and then they would put it in a tractor trailer truck, tanker truck, and truck it to Montpelier's facility. It's just a tremendous amount of grit that's accumulated, and it really everybody I talked to is like, you got to do it. It should have been done. It's supposed to be done. Everybody says yearly, go in, clean your tanks and inspect them. Some of these tanks haven't been emptied in 4 or 5 years.
going on my memory, we had Hardigans do the septage receiving tank 2016. I want to say it was like 14,000.
Could be.
I think that was the last time it was done.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
Kendall, or they had been sucked just minimal amounts. Last year, I think Vitums and Working Dog had just sucked around the outlets so that they didn't plug up. But, one day last week, Alan and I spent over an hour and a half in the morning, literally just unplugging pumps so we could get stuff flowing.
Any questions?
So that's the big cost that I foresee coming down.
And like you said, I think when we talked last week, You might spread that out a bit. So
Well,
some of
it-
it might be
it-
this fiscal year,
yeah.
and some of it might be next fiscal year, just because you have to kind of spread the process out and the
Yeah,
cost
we
might
can't,
be
it's not like you can shut down the whole plant and just go through and clean it. It's, we would do the septic receiving bays first. Then we would do the digester and the day tank for dewatering. And then we're in the process right now of draining the fish tank. Once the fish tank is completely drained, we're gonna go in and clean that, and we can do that. And then we have to fix the outlet valve so that it's operable. And then we can switch over our aeration tank to that one. And the other tank can literally spend all summer drying and be cleaned out when we get there. But we would like by fall to be able to bring the other one back online. The only, I will say today or over the weekend when you saw me, we had a mixer failure in the anoxic tank. That one was just plugged, but then on Sunday there was another one that failed. And that one, literally, when I pulled the mixer out of the tank to clean it, the impellers were completely worn off. The mixer wouldn't even turn. So I got a call in today to price that, and I don't even know how much that is. And then there'll be a little cost in having Dan Pratt do electricity, but that's a you pulled it out, we pulled it out, there's not even an impeller on it. I mean, it's completely worn away.
Are those sort of off the shelf items or?
I believe, yeah, I think we can get one ordered in. And then Dan Proud will have to wire it because it's a watertight wiring, the electrician. I mean, I can not do that part.
Right.
But that's kind of like a consumable that's gonna get replaced every couple of years anyway, right?
I'm I'm sure that it should have been replaced at some point. And I'm sure the large amount of grit going through the whole plant is not great for a mixer.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, it's like a outboard prop that just stirs everything up. And actually, the same company that makes the mixers for our anoxic tank make the mixers that we put into our water tank.
Okay.
But they're different mixers.
Yeah, and we're not going to confuse them.
Okay. Go ahead.
So the grit gets back to the screens needing to be replaced?
Well, the grit, yeah, everything is just completely worn out at that plant.
Right.
I mean, literally, it is. I mean, the two grit screens, you've all seen how much grit. I mean, literally rocks that come in the septage. And some of it's taken out, but a lot of the fine stuff just gets down through, and it becomes just like concrete the further it goes through. I mean, it gets to a point, last year it got to a point in the digester that literally we couldn't pump backwards to try to clear it. It was just, we literally had to get in and run their pipe through to suck it out because it was just such fine. It just keeps getting, it's like, it's hard to describe. It's like concrete when it gets sucked, when it,
Like a silt.
yeah.
It's another task that makes pricing septage hard to figure out because this goes through the plant.
Well, we had quite a talk about trying to price septage, and in the way we're set up, it's just impossible. It's really, really impossible.
Next on the agenda, moving on.
I guess.
And I will relay,
Questions.
when we made Alan sent out text to all the haulers telling them that we were increasing, and nobody
They
has
flinched.
flinched.
Mm.
And I actually made a mistake and told one of the haulers that I thought we were going to 9 cents. And they're like, it's gotta go somewhere.
Yeah. And Sarah, did you have a question? Go ahead.
I actually, Caroline, I actually have questions on the budget side of things, so I know,
Yeah,
I know you jumped to
Okay,
the
no.
maintenance list that had, with their prices on that. I didn't wanna go back to budget if we still had maintenance, but I really appreciate the update on that. So,
We're not to the
When and
budget
how?
yet, right? Yeah, we're 2 minutes, I think, we'll be there.
okay, so we're talking the maintenance stuff. I totally appreciate that.
I do have some, I'm trying to get some information about getting just a basic septage receiving station and how much that would cost. Because as I told Josh, the one thing that you talk to the haulers and it really gets their attention, not the cost we're charging them, but that we're gonna meter their output.
So what would a receiving station be?
It basically, they can be as complex as you want them, to the point where, I mean, I'm just trying to find a basic septage receiving station with a flow meter. And basically, the cheapest ones seem to have just every hauler would get a, just like a credit card. And they,
Oh, yeah, like when you're fueling.
yeah,
Yeah.
so basically you do the same thing and then it spits out, it's hooked up to a computer, gives you a printout of at the end of the month on everybody's thing. And it's based on the exact gallons that they dump in.
And it'll somehow be, if they're, so they can do this after hours or. when-
Well, they could, we don't want them to.
Right, because how do they know that the tanks are not already full?
Right.
Or they're pumping,
I mean, the more advanced, the more there are really advanced septic receiving units, which actually take a sample from, they will take a sample as soon as the person starts to dump. It will be tested for a pH, and if it's out of the range that you set,
Mhm.
it automatically locks them out of the system. They can't dump.
Interesting.
And it also is set up, there are ones that are set up. You know, you can't, monitors the tank levels, so if your tanks are too full, they can't dump. But, I'm just looking for the basic that we can add maybe in the future too.
Well, what's the, did you get a price yet?
I have not,
Okay.
I haven't even, I've got feelers out from a couple of different people, and they haven't gotten back to me.
so they were like, oh, you're gonna do that now.
But the haulers seem very, that, when you talk price, that doesn't seem to affect them because they were like, oh.
So they don't care what it costs. They just want to make sure that it's not being metered.
By bringing it to Richmond, because they're not measuring, or 50% by bringing it to Richmond, because they're not measuring. Who cares if they want to up you a half a penny?
Right.
And they, you know, most places that, I think St. Johnsbury was the last one that put in one. They kept their rate the same. All they did was install their septic receiving station and their revenue went up.
So what does that tell you?
Yeah.
So how do they know what they're pumping, they're moving from? I mean, they must be measuring what they're picking up,
Oh, yeah.
dropping off.
You know, it's. Most septic tanks are 1,000 gallons. So you guess. But there's also, they wash them down, some of them, you know, interiors and stuff. So you don't know. I mean, they go, most of them pick up our 4,000 to 5,000 gallon trucks. So they go to 3 or 4 septic tanks and then they come in. B&P has a brand new truck. It doesn't have a gauge on it to measure how much is in it.
Interesting,
So,
maybe on purpose.
well, I don't. It was an extra $1,000, the driver said,
Yeah,
but the old trucks have it.
right.
So this is, when you talk budget and add it, except substantial things, this could be something, but it would pay itself off probably in the first 3 months.
Right.
Pretty quick, yeah.
And like I said, we've got feelers out there trying to get some information about which ones work and.
Heidi?
And I will just say, to add to that, having something just pumped recently, $490. is what they're getting from a resident.
Is that how much it is?
It is $490. So we need to keep that in mind with how much they're being charged.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I had mine pumped last year. It was 380, I think.
But ours was 300 last year.
$490.
Quick question, Angela Cote.
Go ahead.
The basic units that you say they're gonna be automated so that each hauler that's
Yeah.
delivering will have their own card and they'll just be able to swipe
Yep.
the card, get a little printout of what gallons and that digital record is gonna be able to be downloaded and sent directly to Connie, right? There's no.
I'm not 100, I mean, we have to make sure that the whatever she's using for bookkeeping, but literally right now. We have septage receiving sheets.
Right.
That we add up every day.
Right.
And then we add them up at the end of the month.
Yep.
And make sure they reconcile with what.
Yep.
And yes, so. The basic should be able to go right to common.
Right.
Especially if we get integrated with the town system and the computer system.
Yeah, it'd be great once we have a couple prices. Do they integrate with Nemrick
Yeah.
and can it just automatically upload like we're doing with the water meters?
I wouldn't wait.
No.
What I'm saying is don't, whatever system you are specifying, it should integrate, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
No, once we get some quotes, we'll ask those questions about technical and figure out what the price.
We want,
but
yeah, we want everything to work with the town's up.
Absolutely.
Because truthfully, the less time that I have to spend doing paperwork, the more time I have to fix things,
Mhm.
and there's a lot.
And we have things to fix.
And it's also for checks and balances,
Yeah.
because you could have had a cash and carry system. Because of how the situation, how everything is set up right now.
Yeah,
So it's an auditor's nightmare,
Mhm.
trying to reconcile with how many gallons that you are actually processing for how much revenue you actually took in.
Mhm.
So this, if it's, everybody's got their own card, it's a trackable system. And
Yeah.
there isn't really an override by an employee or a staffer or anybody else to just allow the truck to unload and not be charged. So it's a perfect checks and balance system to go with technology.
Definitely. Heidi?
We have a timeline on when that will be completed.
Get on the mission.
we haven't even got, I mean, I put out feelers to people and trying to get in. So there's a trade show coming up May 11th down in Lake Maury I'm going to it. I don't know, you had some interest and thought,
Yeah, I just haven't been able to confirm my going yet.
I mean,
Go.
so at that trade show, I expect to be making a lot of inquiries. And making some contacts for different things at the town.
So can we say, okay, by July 31st, we'll have.
I would like to be able to say
So
that
We know we're moving forward.
Yeah.
On this, that's just,
I
I
mean,
keep things by timelines.
truthfully, right now, I'm just trying to make sure we have the plant that we can operate.
Yeah, and I think if we get a couple of quotes back and it's
Yeah.
like $4,000 or $5,000, we get 3 quotes, we find one that works for us, we move forward, that's pretty easy. If they come back under $20,000, then we have to do a more involved RFP process and it kicks in,
Right.
and we have to figure out how we're gonna pay for it. So that's why I think these first,
Pay for itself. Trust us.
well, but I mean, like, and then like reserve funds, however we're gonna do it, like, it might be an easy answer, but we'd still have to like find that answer. But that's why I think these initial inquiries, because we don't really know the scope of it at this
No.
point financially, that all feeds into purchasing policy. But, you know, I know as soon as you get some quotes, we'll.
Yeah.
We'll
I
start.
do know that St. Johnsbury said that theirs was paid back,
Sure.
yeah, immensely,
Hmm.
quick turnover.
Questions?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
That's great.
If this is the maintenance part, then,
Well, wait,
So-
should we go on to, should we just try to get onto the schedule?
Yeah.
Okay, so we should talk about cost to treat septage.
Yes.
there is, we can't do it. We can't do it right now.
Right, so
That we,
you want me to give, you want to go? Or either way?
I mean, it's something that going forward in the 20-year upgrade that we definitely want the engineers to talk about. We need to monitor the water going to dewatering. We need to monitor the power that's used in dewatering. Those are the two biggest things. I think we can figure out the polymer use pretty easily. And get a rough idea, and that's the biggest, polymer's your most expensive chemical that we use down there. And it's, we just got 8 more barrels in the other day. And, it's like $1,200 a barrel.
The thing I'm curious about, and Bard's not here, but I think he would agree, both Bard and I have been asking this question for years and we've never got consistent answers, but chemicals we can track, but we were asking and still want to know how the septage receipts impact the plant, the wear and tear on the overall plant.
Well, and I think Josh was aware of this after he came down for a little tour and a meeting the other day, and I gave him the tour kind of like I gave you guys, that septage is kind of its own separate stream.
Yeah.
But there is a wear and tear involved in the plant because of the high amount of grit and gravel that's in it.
Yeah.
And the rags that get by.
And I don't want to dwell on the past, but the answer we got in the past was, well, the plant's paid for, so that cost is irrelevant. Well, no, it's not, because
It's gonna be replaced, right?
the plant needs to be maintained.
And that's
So-
right, from what you, sorry.
It sounds like we need meters to measure, and then it sounds like you need to monitor like the power and some stuff like that. Is this something that like, once we have the meters, we could say from, maybe like Heidi said, July 1st would, like if you had them, could we monitor them from like August 1st to September 1st and see all
Well,
the
that's if we
expenses?
can
Like,
get them in place.
but is that a feasible like way to figure it out, is once we have the meters, collect the data and whether we put it into a
It's
spreadsheet?
more
or-
data. I mean, it will show us the actual amount of septage going into the plant to be treated.
Yeah.
I think what we really have to get a handle on is how much septage makes our plant work efficiently for the town.
Mhm.
And then once you get that, it's a base level, because we use the septage to add to our wasting. That's the town part of it that goes into the digester. And the septage is a benefit to the town because we get a drier cake and it costs you less because you're not paying to truck water away. So there's a benefit to the town there. But then once you get past that point and, and like today, I think we took in 48,000 gallons of septage. We only wasted for 5,400 gallons of town solids were put in there. So we have to figure out what's the benefit to the town. And then there is a price break after that.
Mhm.
Really is. Because when you're dewatering just town waste, you cannot get it dry.
No. Yeah,
It's
that's what
liquid.
you said before.
And once you add some of the septage to it, it gets a much drier cake. So you're saving on the long run, getting rid of your waste, because you're not getting rid of water, you're getting rid of dry material.
So how much, do you know how much you don't know how much septage you need to offset our
I believe
dewatering?
it's in the 15 to 20,000 range.
Gallons a day?
Yeah.
Okay.
If we're wasting about 5,400 gallons of
Town.
town waste.
So Steve, is that something that the engineer can probably help us figure that out?
So I think, and
The
they've
other-
done,
Second part of my question, the other part of that is then, once it goes through that, there's actually sort of a return that comes into the system, and we need to better measure that. So
right,
we know not just what comes in, but then kind of as it comes in and goes to the digester, what comes back into the system and continues to go. So then you can, and I don't know how you do those calculations, and that's where also, once you meter that, hopefully the engineer can help us figure that out.
And is the engineer the person that's
This is-
filling in from the state,
No, this will
or
be
the
the
engineer
20-year
with the
study.
20-year study? Okay.
this is the 20-year study. And the more and more we get a handle on, I get a handle, Alan gets a handle on how the plant's designed and how it was designed, we can, you know, talking with Phil Laramie, he's like, you have an influent line that comes in from the town, but just before it comes into the wet well, that deep hole,
Mhm.
it merges with our dewatering line. And Phil's like, in your 20-year upgrade, just to run that line into the wet well. So you can have two flows coming in that you can monitor.
So you
One of them is from the town and one of them is the supernate coming off of the press or the liquid that's coming back into the thing.
Mhm.
If we keep those two streams separate till they come into the wet well, then we can monitor them separately.
Mhm.
The way it is now, they mix in a manhole outside and then come in as one stream.
Mm.
And that's one of the other things that you know, he's like a pipe fitter. It's like a 5-minute job to run another line in, and you're gonna have pipe fitters around here doing stuff all day long for the 20-year upgrade. He's like, that's when you do it. That's when you do some of this stuff. So you can make the plant more efficient and be able to monitor it better.
Heidi,
He asked, Josh asked exactly what I was thinking with the engineer, like how this is all gonna be calculated.
is,
Yeah.
Thank you, Josh.
Currently then, are there meters on those two lines that are mixing in that? So neither one of them are metered?
There's
Would they be
only
able to be
meter-
Metered if you were to plumb both of them?
Right now you couldn't do it because they come into the plant as one. So everything, and feel free to come down. We'll give you the tour just like I
I'll
gave
schedule
everybody
after
else.
this meeting,
Uh-huh.
all right? I'll schedule after this meeting, sir.
But so that the influent from the town and the influent from the dewatering plant merge outside of the wet well. So we only measure the flow that comes into the wet well and then is pumped into our headworks.
So at this point, earlier this evening, you said about 5,400 gallons. Today,
No, that's the
of
50 of,
town sewage that needed to be.
so you
treated.
need to come in and I need to
Okay.
give you the
Right,
really.
later, yeah,
Yeah,
into-
no,
into the aggregate here. I just
Sure.
wanna.
Yeah.
You should be able to write down some numbers over the next 30 to 60 days and be able to say for each septage, for every day, this is what we received. And this is how much came from the town approximately.
We
Even
have
before
those
the-
numbers. I can go right to the plant right now and give me one.
Perfect. Thank you.
but the way it is now, you know, let's say you have 5 trucks coming in, each truck averages a 6,000 gallon tank and the operators say it was 4,000 or 5,000. So, you know, it's not more than $6,000, but you're going on the driver in observation of 4,000 or 5,000 gallons. So we can all add all that.
Right now, the percentage that the amount that came from the town today was 5,400 gallons. And we took in, I think it was 48,000 gallons from septage receiving. All of that is being processed through dewatering over the night. And then we have a number. We know how much we put the flow through the press.
When you say 5,400 gallons, that's not what flowed through the pipes into the system today.
No.
That's what we wasted into the
Correct.
digester. So there's that,
And that's why I
I
said
don't
you really
know
need to
everybody
come
was
down to see.
getting that detail on it,
Yeah,
right? That's the amount of gallons.
yeah, it was way more than, I mean, we bring in way more than that
A
in
lot
a
of
day.
water comes in.
I'm talking about what goes into the digester itself.
Right.
Today, we put 5,400 gallons from the town into the digester. And we put 48,000 gallons of septage.
Plus it rained today, so the town inflow is
But
high.
but the rain doesn't have any effect on what goes into the digester.
No.
Because
Well,
it
it's open. I mean, it gets a little rain, but
Right,
not a lot.
that's not, again, you're measuring what the solids are, you're skimming off the bottom of that one tank into
Correct.
the digester, so the flows through the tank, the flows through the system are gonna be higher because of the rain, but that wasting is probably not gonna be, because it's all the solids.
The solid, no, the solid should be.
So the town's septic, if you want to term it that, is more liquid
Yes.
than what we're taking in. So it seems like the question, and you're trying to determine calculations, you still have to know what the biocide loading is to accurately calculate what it's costing us for the septic that we're taking in. I mean, I know you can say, here's gallons of this, but that still doesn't tell you what the true cost to process. that.
No,
So that seems to be the other part of the equation that we might not be able to measure. I mean, so you still are estimating what the cost is of septic versus what the sewers that we have.
Connie?
This is all excellent information, but we're a half hour in and we have not really looked at the budget. So if we're going to relate this to dollars and how we plan to pay for these things, that's great, but
Are we ready to talk about the budget?
Sure.
Okay. Review of draft fiscal year 24 water and wastewater budget.
Did you go over your Q3 financials? Were you doing that before you did your FY24 budget? I mean, you talked about, and that's what my question is the financials and the budget numbers.
Yeah, we
You said
briefly
you were gonna
talked
talk
about them.
maintenance stuff first. So are we gonna talk about financials before the budget, or are you gonna talk about budget? As financials impact your budget?
We want to go back to.
I mean, I think we can bring financials into the budget. I mean, so basically, financials went fairly quickly. We really quickly segued into some operation numbers. I think, yeah, like if there's a financial number that you see that we want to talk about for the budget, let's talk about it in this agenda item.
So the question that I have relating to the Q3 financials are, where do you really stand on your Q3 in comparison to your budget? If your budget has things that don't hit until Q4, your measurement of Q3 is really measured against the previous year's Q3. Like, are you lining up? Are you way over? Are you under? Or where you should be in Q3, so you could project what you anticipate for the Q4. Because if you're going to have unallocated funds at the end of the year, how much is that going to be? 20,000 or 200,000? So that's where I'm trying to, based on the information I saw online with the Q3 financials, I love the notes. They were very helpful all the way down the side with the different information. But in the end, when you're looking at, are you turning a profit, or are you in the hole? Where are you at the end of Q3 compared to where you should be at the end of Q3?
Right, so that's a good question. I can speak to that a bit. So part of what I was going to talk about with the budget right now remains in the packet, unchanged from the last time we reviewed it. I did add some more budget notes of things that I had talked about at last meeting. Maybe you saw those in there too, just to try to talk about in general sort of changes and why we made those changes. One of the things that we tried to follow up on was the unassigned funds. As we've worked with the previous auditors, they helped us out, put a spreadsheet together. We've been trying to continue with that spreadsheet to understand where we're at with unassigned funds. As we reviewed that again this year, there were a number of questions that came up on it from ourselves included. So we went back to the auditors that we have right now, our HR. He actually, I think, provided a much better way to get there. He actually looked at the audit and said, okay, here's your, I want to make sure I get the wording correct. Where unrestricted funds are for both water and wastewater. And he said, that's basically where you are at the end of fiscal year 22 with unrestricted funds. But what you have to do from that is subtract out the 3 reserve accounts on either side. Because in water and wastewater accounting and proprietary funds, those aren't subtracted out ahead of time. Like in general fund, the unassigned is after you've accounted for a reserve fund. Here you have to subtract those out. So we look at those, we subtract those out, and then that's where you're at essentially with unassigned funds at the end of fiscal year 22. In water, when you look at that, it's actually a negative.
22 or 23?
Sorry, I'm back in 22. I'm
Okay.
sorry, I haven't gotten forward yet. I'm still at June 30th, 2022.
Okay.
So we look at those unrestricted funds, subtract out the 3 reserve funds. That's your unassigned funds that you have at the end of fiscal year 22. If you look at water, that's actually in the negative because we were still waiting on payback from the Bridge Street project that we did. So that was about, I think I print that out, it's about $300,000 that we had to add back in for that. Anyway, You add that back in, and then you say, okay, we know we're getting that, we got that in early fiscal year 23, so we know that's coming back in from the loan. And then we also look at what unassigned funds have we committed to using in FY 23. So we knew that we put in, and I don't have it right in front of me, but there was a certain amount in water, a certain amount in wastewater. You subtract those out. And that gives you a rough projection. If everything in water and wastewater comes in exactly on budget in 22, that in 23, that's where you'd end up at the end of June 30th. So I did that work on a spreadsheet. I sent it back to Ron. This is at the end of last week. I didn't make it public because I want the auditor to look at it to make sure that I'm doing it right. But if we do that, the rough numbers that I came up with is about 215,000 for water and 330,000 for wastewater. That we would project about 215 for water and about 330 for wastewater. That's if everything comes in exactly on budget for the end of 23. The next step, to your point, is to really sit down and kind of go line by line and say, because you can't just look at wages and say, oh, we're at 60%, let's add another quarter onto that, because our wages have changed over the year. We were at a different payroll in July than we were in October, than we are now. So we have to project forward and say, based on this, here's what we think we're going to get for wages, based on, electricity, other things. So it's going to take a little bit more analysis to dive in line by line to then project where we're going to come out in 23. And then you'll have a basic over under of water and wastewater that then you can really add in and have a much better projection for exactly where we're going to end in 23.
But your 215 and 330 were estimated projections.
That's estimated projections,
Based on, yeah.
assuming everything comes in exactly on budget. I mean, without diving into it, I think we're gonna have more than that in both, because we're under in wages, I'm sure. I know we're over in some repairs, obviously, but I don't think that's going to quite
Majority of
equal.
everything, you just go down through where you're at for quarter 3 is you're under almost on everything.
I think so.
Except
We've raised septage rate.
And we've raised septage rate, so yeah, we'll probably have a little bit more than budgeted revenue. But that's one of the things we want to do is go in and try to get a better look at where we're at. But I think for the purpose of tonight, if we wanted to start saying, well, what if we used $100,000? Like, how would that affect it? We know that we'll have at least that in unassigned funds.
And can I ask one more question? Because that really helped. Thank you.
Okay.
That was the missing piece to the puzzle that when I looked at everything,
Sure.
you hadn't released it yet. That aligns perfectly with my thought process.
Okay.
You got to figure out what you're going to have. The question that I had is because on the septage thing, you had on that spreadsheet, you have something called, the bank accounts for water and sewer added together that totals as of March 1.5 million.
Let me just pull those up. I think I know where you're at. Just give me a sec.
Maybe that was you had the 1,052,000 was on one spreadsheet and then 1.5 million was on another one.
I think, are you looking at? Let
One
me
is
just make sure I'm
reserves.
looking at the right.
One is reserved, this is the one with 1.5 million, yep. From March. This is called water and sewer bank accounts.
Right, so that's what's in the bank account. I think, Connie, that's what's in the bank account at the end of March in fiscal year 23. And that's water and wastewater combined in the bank account.
Okay, so that's the bank account. Now, the one that has the reserve account information on it,
Should you look at this one?
yep, with 1,052,000 total there for water and sewer together. These reserves, are they in that bank account? Or are they, how are these reserves compared to that bank account total that's 1.5 million?
Right, so those are in the bank account, right, Connie? Connie's nodding yes. There's no separate bank account.
So the 1,052,000 is reserves. So if you back out, you take the 1.5 less the 1,052, that difference is basically.
Right.
That's your 500,000 right there.
So that's right, and that's sort of, so that's your point in time unassigned funds, right? Which
Right,
I think,
but that comes to. What you're saying at the end of the year, you're probably gonna run a.
right, it just so happens in that line, the thing that I caution about using sort of that point in time is that there's there's still larger expenses to be paid,
Oh, yeah.
you know.
It's not about the point in time for me. I just wanted to
Okay.
confirm the
Yes.
reserves are in the bank account, that this number is part of that 1.5
Yes.
million.
Do not have a total of 2.5 million.
Correct.
Correct.
I don't want
Okay,
to-
sorry, yes.
You talk reserves and bank accounts.
I
The
just-
reserves are in the bank
I
account.
just know sometimes that point in time can go up or down based on, did you just receive
Oh, yeah.
bills?
No, no,
Did you just send
I
bills out?
totally get that.
Okay, I wanted to make sure that we were clear on that.
Wanting to make
Okay.
sure that it's the same money.
Yep, same money. We don't have another account.
Thank you for clarifying that stuff. So now my questions about the FY 23 third quarter financials are answered.
Okay,
Yay. So, I'll turn it back to what you want to do with the budget, if there's more questions, or if we want to move on to.
so we're back on
Rates is also a good thing to talk about.
D, review of draft fiscal year 24 water and wastewater budget.
Ready for
Ready.
questions if anybody has them, and I'll pull them up here if you want.
Yeah.
This is. Get the right ones here. It's the water budget. Water, wastewater. Again, unchanged from last time we looked at these, take into account, payroll, we looked at, some increasing costs of chemicals, other increasing costs.
Trucking.
There we go.
For solids, Casella.
Yes, I think Connie, that was part of the solids disposal and the new contract with Casella. That won't kick in until February, but we looked at that cost and then tried to get an approximation for those last 5 months of the fiscal year, yes. And also we added in like a 9% bump to, I think it was the polymer maybe. There was a 9% bump last spring. We're anticipating another one, kind of trying to budget conservatively.
So what do we not know as far as being able to project cost wise in fiscal year 24 at this point?
I mean, I think everything that we know, we've added into this, if there's something else that comes up, we won't know, but we've tried to take the information they have available and project those costs as best as we can.
So we don't know about a septage waste station. I guess maintenance
those
is
types
the
of things,
big,
yeah.
big thing we don't know.
Yeah, so, right, so I added a few of those on, let me get to that page. In the bottom of the notes section, which was here. Right, so what we looked at was some higher price, let me make this bigger, I'm sorry, it gets to be two different sizes on my screen and on the screen, okay. So this is review, so when we looked at some of the higher priced items, we've got that ongoing to-do repair list. We looked at, okay, if we want to do a water meter upgrade, we don't know exactly how much that'll cost us at this point. The 20-year, we do have, it's in it for later, but we have, it'll be over $100,000. We need to figure out how we pay for that. But we do have some reserves that could go to that. The 20-year valuation is 154,000. Some of that will hit in 23, some of that'll hit in 24. And it's also a 50% subsidy on that. And then ultimately we'll get that paid back by CWSRF and it will become a loan. So there will be some cash outlay for that. We'll get it all back and then have to start a loan in probably to FY 25. Cost of engineering for the Tilden, Bridge Street, Cochrane Road waterline replacement. This is very similar to the 20-year study where it's going to be $92,000 spread over a couple of fiscal years. We'll get 50% forgiveness. We'll get the loan money back on that, and then we'll start to pay a loan on that. Two of the more expensive items on our replacement list, the water tank mixer, estimated about $200,000. $20,000. I don't know if we'll know that exact number before we have to set the budget. We'll know a little bit better, but that again, it's probably a reserve item. Influent pumps estimated at 30 to 50,000. Again, I would say a good use of reserves for those two items. And then the other items on the list are lower cost repairs that we couldn't necessarily pinpoint, and they're going to be kind of spread over 23 and 24. So we had talked about maybe increasing the contributions to capital reserves. So that way we have some money there to pay for those. We're not just overspending an expense line. And if we come in under somehow, then that money would actually still be there for future use and we wouldn't be going into an unassigned fund.
And the inventory, the line inventory. Is that in here?
They did not, line inventory, I need to add that. Oh, no, well, so I can add it in, but that one is gonna be 100% covered, but there will be some cash outlay before we're reimbursed. But I'll add it in as a note, I did omit that one.
So this, we're guessing, will be roughly $420,000 outlay.
I haven't added it all up, but if you were doing the math along, probably, but like, 250 of that, we will be getting reimbursed. So we do, but you're right, we have to make sure we have some of that money. Or if we don't, we have to get like a bond anticipation note to cover that for a few months until we get it back. You've got a few hands up. I don't know who's first.
I'll go with Connie and then Kara. Connie, go ahead.
I was just gonna say along the same lines as Josh, anytime we're doing those revolving loans, we will get the money back, but we never know if it's gonna be 3 months, 6 months, or we just had one that took us like 12 months to get it back. So if we start using those unassigned funds, we just need to remember that that's our cash flow in some respect in a situation like this. And we can do a bond anticipation note. They will do them for a year. But when we look the last time, they would not do them for less than a year or more than a year. If you needed to extend it at the end of the year, you can.
That's a good point. The only thing I think I'd add is the planning engineering notes. I think we usually get reimbursed more quickly because they're less complicated than the construction ones. The construction ones are the ones that lag on with wage certification, Davis-Bacon Act. Like those are the ones that get held up longer. The engineering ones, in my experience, have been a lot quicker turnaround.
So I think that comes to my point with not putting more in your reserves because you get limited use of a restricted reserve versus having extras in your unallocated so that if you have expenses that are running higher or lower, you're taking it out of the unassigned funds versus banking stuff into a reserve and then never tapping into that because this is just a maintenance thing or an emergency thing, or just we're going to do it this way. So I think the problem of keep banking money and then not using it, whereas if you need it, use it. And so that's my point with continuing to bank reserves and not using them.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't help your cash flow then.
Yeah, that's fair.
You're not allowed to touch it.
Yeah. Questions, comments?
Connie's still got her hand up.
Oh, go ahead, Connie.
The reserves in the water and sewer department work differently than our general. Technically, there are no reserves in proprietary in the government. So historically, the reserves that we have been put into reserves for purposes of the emergency repairs, such as water line breaks, things that are not in the standard operational budget. So it functions differently than how you see it function for the town reserves. We're not setting them up necessarily for a particular thing. We are setting it up for the emergencies that fall outside of the budget because the water and sewer budget is really tight.
Do we want to talk rates for a little bit?
I guess.
I mean, it's in the same agenda item, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so. Let me make sure I think what might be helpful, just as sort of table setting, is I'll walk through how we've set rates since I've been here, and then we can kind of take questions and comments from there.
Can you blow that up, Josh? Do you mind?
Yeah. So let me try to get that. This one does get a little small. Okay. I will try to keep my eye on where we're at with both of these. All right. So what we do is at the beginning, we take a look at what's the total budget in water in FY24 is 409,283. The total budget in sewer is 967,874. So this is total expenses projected in the budget that we just looked at for water and sewer. I'm going to skip over some of these things. I mean, these are just sort of comparisons to last year that may or may not be helpful depending on what we're looking at. The first thing we look at is what other revenues are going to come into this other than our core users being residential, commercial and government, and the schools. So we have an industry fixed rate for sewer and commercial is the government plus 15%. This is the Stone Corral. The only industry that we have is the brewery. So we have a fixed rate. We understand the revenue we'll get from that over the year. We kind of actually look back at what we've gotten in years past as far as total amount of variable rate. We're up to $6,700 is what we're looking at to come in from the industry. Then we have a couple of allocated accounts here. So these are allocated accounts that have been allocated but not yet hooked up to the system. The allocated accounts fixed rate for water is half commercial government and for sewer is half commercial and government. So these are fairly small amounts of revenue, but nonetheless, we want to make sure we track them, calculate them and factor them in when we're looking at commercial and government or core users. So when we get into non-user group revenue, and these are all also on the budget side. So sale of water is budgeted for $1,500, fire protection fee $51,449, hook on fees at $500, net interest on checking $6,000, unassigned funds of $27,339 for a total of $86,788. We do the same thing over on the sewer side, although instead of the water usage, it's septage revenue. So you'll see over here, this is where it gets tough. We have septage revenue budgeted right now at $460,000. We have unassigned funds budgeted at $48,000. And like we talked about last time, those are basically just carried over from the last one. So the methodology is, all right, let's take a look at those plus what we are going to get from the other accounts above. And we determine our total revenue from non-core users is $88,032. Revenue remaining to be raised from users is $321,000. So we take the total amount that we need, subtract the $88,000, and we're left with $321 that needs to be raised by the water users. And we'll stick with water for now because it's probably easier than bouncing back and forth. It's the same basic methodology on both. So then we look at usage over the last 12 months. So this goes from essentially April 1st of 22 through the end of March this current year. So it's 12 months continuous of usage. We look at residential, commercial, and school. Then we look at what percentage of total water usage is each one using. So in residential's case, it's 56% of the total usage, commercials at about 38%, and schools at about 5%. Then we take 98% of that because we want to budget for if usage were to go down and our rate stayed on this usage, we would actually get a little less because we would be billing for less water flow. So we take it at 98% of the flows. We also make an adjustment to account for the fact that the school does not pay for water for fire protection. So that's an additional 5% we add of percentage points from the school. We take that off of residential and commercial and basically reduce what we're paying what residential and commercial pays and increasing that by the same amount on the school side. So then we're left with a budget allocations per core user group, and we go through and determine, okay, we need to raise 172,000 from water based on their percentage, 116,000 from commercial and government, and $32,000 on the school side. Then that flows down into this section here where these we've kept the same for a number of years. We could talk about changing them, but for the purposes of this, we've started with where we've been. So in residential, we have a 30% fixed fee and 70% metered fee. So we say, okay, we need to raise 172,000, 30% of that is 122. Divide that by a total, the revenue we need is 51,000. Divide that by a total number of users, you're at 122. And with metered, we're looking at raising $120,000. Divide that by the total gallons used, you're looking at $12.65 per thousand. And we continue that same logic down through commercial and government and school to set the metered and fixed rate. But you'll see that the difference between fixed and metered does change a bit between the different classes. And that, again, I think was established last time we really took a deep dive at the rates.
So can I say something?
Go ahead, Heidi.
So just looking at this with the fixed rates, so I see in 2024 and 2023, residential fixed rates stayed the same. Commercial then $122.61. So it actually went up, what was it? Pennies. And now I'm looking at the commercial government. And it went from $596.07 to $622. Again, this is where I keep going on to this whole thing of being 5 times as much as residential. On the fixed part of that.
Right, and just on the math, basically, I mean, they're, if you look at. So they're using 38, commercial government's using 38% of the water, but it's only spread across 75 accounts, right? So that's where you're gonna get that higher fixed cost, and I, just to point that out, that's how. Basically how the math works out.
Aaron?
I have two questions. First question, how does the school have the exact same number of gallons of water and sewer
Okay.
usage?
Yep.
That's my first question.
Mhm.
And then my second question is why is the septage revenue budgeted in the sewer if we can't count septage revenue? That's not the septage that we take in from haulers, is it? That 460?
So your first question.
Okay.
The school is the same because we don't meter the septage. So basically, if you look at a residential bill, your water bill usage is the same as your septage usage. The system basically assumes that if you use it, if 1,000 gallons goes in, 1,000 gallons is going out.
Okay.
Not all of it's captured because sometimes you're washing your car, watering the lawn, but on school, it's very straight in and out.
Okay.
In the residential, I think that some of that is also farms. So there's some that just have water going in, but there's no sewer bill. So that's where you'll see that there's a little bit higher water and lower sewer. And then in the commercial and government, water is quite a bit higher because the wastewater plant is using lots of water, but they're not paying a sewer bill. So we're not monitoring sewer. So that water usage is going to be ramped up quite a bit. So that's why there are those differences and why school is an even 1-for-1. On the revenue from septage, so what we look at is every year we essentially budget an estimate of what we think we'll get in that fiscal year for septage. And in years past, we tried to be fairly conservative because we weren't really sure, like, is it going to hold? Are we still going to get this? If you look at the history of the budget, it has gone up. We used to be at, I think, like let me find the budget, wastewater.
I guess my question for that is more specific that like this whole time that I've been doing this, we've talked about septage rates. We've been saying we don't count on those for the budget.
Right.
But now they're in on the line.
Are you
That's where I'm
talking-
confused.
She asked, is this the septage that the plant processes for the town, or is this commercial septage coming in?
This is
That was
commercial
her
septage,
question.
sorry, maybe I misheard. This is the commercial septage coming in to take off of what the users would pay. So when we look at the total amount, that comes off because we're assuming we'll get at least 460 in. So it does actually affect the rates
Okay,
by reducing them.
okay.
Sorry if I misunderstood initially.
Kara? Yeah.
You said the school does not pay the fire protection.
Okay.
Can you
Yep.
expand on that?
Yeah, so when you look at the regular general fund budget, in there's a fire protection fee on the expense side. What that is, it's essentially adding to the tax rate of everybody in town to help pay back for part of the loan of the water tank. That at the time it was built, I think it was built bigger on purpose to provide for fire protection so that the fire department can use that. And I think it's also 5% of the overall water budget gets put into that. So that's about $50,000 per year that all the taxpayers are paying for that. And the school not paying property taxes is not assessed taxes, so they don't pay into that fire protection. So this is a way to have the school also pay in.
So this is the school actually paying in toward fire protection through this.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that's not how I heard it, so that's.
Oh,
why I
sorry,
took
that's
it.
what.
Yeah, no,
When you
that's-
say they don't pay, you were saying they don't pay on
They
the
don't
tax
pay-
side of things, but they do pay on this side.
This is making them pay, yes.
Correct, okay.
Correct.
I just want to make
State
sure.
told us we needed to put in a new water tank.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I think.
So the engineer said, oh, we need a tank this size,
Yeah.
but you really want one
This
this
is-
size.
this is
for fire
charging.
protection.
Yeah. No, you're right.
What you're
Yeah.
saying is they actually, this is their way of.
Right.
Because they don't pay, we add this 5% in and now they pay.
That's why it's separated there.
Yeah, no, thank you. It gets confusing, so thank you.
And that's why it's called out separately to explain why it's there and how it's there.
Has the school water usage gone up significantly with their, since like the quarantine years?
So I think.
So it's
Heidi's-
been going back there.
Well, I'm like, I know they want, like, they literally, we have little kids in the school, like, it sounds like they spend half their day washing their hands, like, has their,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
you know what I mean? Like,
That
have
side.
they gone, has their usage gone up since?
So we can look, if you look at the Excel version of this, it goes back and gives you some history. Although I think, was it 20, which year was it? We actually went back to usage from the 2 years prior because COVID was such a weird year.
Time?
So I think that was, it would have been in 21 when we were setting the 22 rates. Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause they weren't there in
Note on
21.
that.
At 2019 though, because they were there for, COVID was
I went back
2020.
to 2017.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
I did.
what I was gonna say is you can
Or
go
that
back
too.
through these tabs and look at previous usage. With the 22 years gonna be a little off because that was in 21. So as we look back at the previous 12 months, it was so out of whack because the
Yeah.
school was closed for like most of the time. So then we used the actual usage from the year prior, figuring, but try to budget on a more reasonable expectation of what's going forward. So I don't have an exact like year to year usage from the school. Would be interesting to see.
I think you should look at their highest year. I mean, that's realistic. Go back to 2018 and look at their highest year.
I went back to 2017.
Right.
Because before
enrollment.
enrollment is another thing because the elementary school is higher than it was.
Yeah.
2017.
So it's only gonna go up.
So, yeah, I mean, if you look at, so last year when we set the rates, we used 854,000 gallons. And then this year in the past 12 months, they used 881,000 gallons. So those are the last 24 months of actual usage was 854 here. And then 881 in the last 12 months. So I think those are fairly accurate as kind of kids are back into their regular routine. Schools have been open. I think
Yeah.
the beginning part of this number, the schools are maybe, I think there were 4 days a week that one fall,
Yeah,
but
Can I ask for the three schools? What are
Is-
the three schools?
right, the middle school, I look back at it when we're looking at rates. When the rates were established, the middle school was charged as 2 schools, I think, to get them 2 fixed rates maybe.
They do have two fixed rates.
Yeah,
I
and,
can see that.
yeah, and that's why, like, and I, without diving into the intricacies of those conversations, I can't tell you exactly why that decision was made, but that's what I was able to see.
Angela?
So, this is a more, granular about the school, but, on a more global level, you are basing your rates on a 98% usage from the previous year. And my question is, how valid has that assumption been on establishing these rates from year to year?
Holy, that is.
You're just telling me right now that the
Yeah.
school, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is that assumption that you've been operating under for so long, does it still hold water? Is it still a valid assumption to be basing your rates
Right,
on?
is usage actually going down? Well, let's see, from residential, we went from 9.9 million to 9.7, so it went down. Commercial and government was 6.5 million. Yeah, they stayed about even, 6,580, 6,558, 6,585, they went up slightly, 30,000 gallons. So I guess based on just comparing last year to this year, a little mixed.
I guess there's more longitudinal data. My question is more,
Yeah, how long, what's the general
Right.
trend? I don't, and with COVID year in the middle there, where residential probably spiked, school went down. It would be really, but there to be a blip, I don't know, it's just, so I get my answer, I don't have that data. I still think it's. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, you
it's an
could,
assumption worth,
you could debate whether we want to
investigating.
put it in or not, but.
but that would result in lower rates if you were to, I guess,
Yeah, I
analyze
guess
the trend. analyze
Slightly
the
lower
trend.
rates for, yeah, so because you would 2%, you could do that, yeah. And we could just base it on 100% and. You know, hopefully, and knowing we also have unassigned funds, so if people really conserve the water. Then we would have some buffer.
And that's my last question, I promise.
Okay.
Reserve versus unassigned. You did a fantastic job at town meeting.
Yeah.
And I want to understand a little bit more in detail what Connie is saying about using the word reserve versus unassigned in specific to the water and sewer department here.
Yeah.
And that's not exactly what's happening, that if monies are called reserve, it's not earmarked for a specific thing. It can be used for emergency purposes that aren't necessarily within that. Do you understand what I'm?
I do.
Okay,
Connie,
so can you speak to that in more detail? Is the
Yeah.
unassigned and reserve just one big fund?
Not really, because it is earmarked, but Connie, I'm gonna let you, because I think you understand the accounting language better than I do when it comes to water and wastewater reserves.
Sure, when you look at the town's reserves, most of them are restricted. If you look at our capital plan, you can see what's going into them has a very specific purpose within a 5-year time frame. From what our auditors have told us, with water and sewer with proprietary, you can't have a reserve. Well, that wasn't good enough for us. We wanted a way to put this money out there that we knew it was there. So we found a workaround. If you look at the trial balance, you'll see your assets, your liabilities, and then your fund balance. So what we did is several years ago, we figured out what should be in each of these reserves based on what we expensed for and what we used. And we extracted that out of the fund balance line and created 3 sub-balance lines. So although they're fund balances, we call them reserves. They do not have a specific purpose like you would see on the town side. It's money that we're setting aside. The bigger ones, I mean, I could look at one of them and say, hey, that's really more. We have what, a short term, and then one just called capital, and then one called collection system on one side and distribution system on the other side. On both of those, the ones that we contribute the most money into are the ones that we rarely use. Okay. So as you can see, if you look up at the water, although that one we did use some this year, 8,900 on the 10-year capital. Water system distribution, short-term capital, and then the water term capital. To be honest, I don't know how the board decides which of those is used for which things that come up. But you can definitely see that historically, looking back over time, it's the same one on each side that has the higher balance. That may be more of a long-term goal.
So Connie, would it be fair to say that in the town side, if it's in fire engine reserve, it has to be spent on a fire engine? But if it's in water, it's in water capital reserve, and the board says, geez, we really need that to be spent on something in water that's not water capital, they could do that because there's no statutorial like restriction to that like there would be in the general fund. Is that fair to say?
Correct. And when we look at it, capital. Sorry.
Okay. Something down the wrong pipe, maybe. But I think that's it. It's just like there's not like a specific restriction on it like there would be. It's more the commission saying we want to use this for the water capital in the future. So best practice is to continue that.
Karen?
Obviously.
So I think by calling it a reserve and using the same exact language that you use for the town
Maybe there's a better way.
is a better term to be used for that, because even as you go through different commissioners, a reserve means it's for a specific purpose. Whereas if these are just funds, they don't even need to be subcategoried anymore. If you're telling me that there's 200 and something thousand in water and 700 and something thousand in wastewater, then these are basically your savings accounts. And that's all they are. Especially if you take this as not restricted at all, it's just a fund and it's part of your 1.5, which is your bank account. Then none of these are restricted. None of them are reserved. This fund is for you to do whatever you need to do with it, is what's just been explained. So that really puts you at a tipping point. If you're supposed to be at 15% unassigned funds, these are all technically unassigned funds. It's in a savings account versus a checking account kind of mentality, even though it's all in the same account. So calling it reserves. The same language that you use for the town stuff, if they're not restricted, it's very confusing, and I think it's even confusing for commissioners.
Heidi?
So simple thing is calling it a savings. The next
Yeah.
thing is. So these funds would be able to be used to reduce the rates because they are not restricted.
I think, and I want to hear from Connie, we might even need to just double check with our auditors, but I think yes, but at the risk of then saying, if we were really using that to like save for something on the capital side, then you have less that you're saving for, which is a decision that could be made, and that's fine. It just needs to be made consciously to know if we don't have it there, then we have to raise money for that capital item in the
Right.
future. And I think we do have, it kind of ties back to the capital plan a bit as well, as far as what do we want to do.
But at that point,
So-
would you
Sorry.
go for a bond?
Well, and that's where the decision's made in the capital plan, like we've been talking about, do we bond for this, or we raise money in advance?
Like, okay, I've been on the water and sewer for 30 years. I've paid all this.
Yeah.
Going, okay, at some point. It's someone else's turn to pay for it, you know?
I think Connie had maybe more to add. Connie, are you back with us?
You okay?
Right. So when you look back at the other thing that's different between the general and the water and sewer is that the water and sewer main fund balance is very convoluted. It is not at all like the general, like the town side of things. Assets are commingled in there that aren't cash, asset depreciation. Other things are managed. So I think part of by creating these little subcategories was a way for us to keep tabs on what do we have that's out there that's available for those things that we did not plan on in the budget.
And I think some of it, the short term, whenever we go for a loan, I think that's one of the questions too, is how much do we have for short-term capital replacement? Usually in a GWSRF application, isn't that right, Connie? Maybe not. Connie, when we go for like the DWSRF loans, they usually want to know what our fund balance is on like a short-term capital reserve, right?
Correct, yes.
Because they want to make sure that we do have sufficient funds to cover those.
Right, I mean, and you want to show that to the bank too, anytime you're going for a loan, they want to know what are your assets? And unfortunately with water and sewer, as I said, that main fund balance is, it just has so many different things in it, which is what's made it difficult to come to the conclusion of what do we have in unassigned funds? So I mean,
So that's where my next question is, on the revenue chart that you showed, you had a line item of unassigned of about 48,000. And I'm wondering, what does that mean now in the context of all of these different
Right.
funds?
So
And why is it only 48,000 if there's hundreds of thousands of dollars in the different?
Yep, so that goes back to when we were talking about how the auditor pointed to the sorry, when you pointed to the unrestricted funds in the audit. In those unrestricted funds are also the savings account, reserve funds, wherever we want to call them at this moment. So that's why you have to subtract those out. So then what that money is when we look at, and we get to the right spot, when we look at the contribution of unassigned funds, we're looking at that after we subtract out the reserves to say, okay, we know we've set aside this money for capital purchases, what's left over after that? And then what portion of that do we want to put towards the budget? That's how we've done it in the last couple of years.
So it doesn't feel like an accurate picture, really.
Well, so
I'm just
it's
saying,
accurate in saying that if the commission wants to agree that we're setting aside, a certain amount for those three reserves in water, then after that, it's going to say how much is essentially on hand that's not really set aside for something. And of that, the commission last year decided to use 27,339 to go towards it. So the 27,339 is accurate what they budgeted, based on the information that we had of unassigned at that point.
so what you're putting forward is only that's approved to be shall we say, transfer from the savings account into the checking account to get your basic, that's the approved. You went in and you authorized the transfer.
We said that we will put this much money towards the budget going forward, and meaning that we would leave some unassigned and then some in the reserves. Yes, I think that's a way to look at it. And for this
Oh.
budget, I just put, we kept it the same as last year, wanting to have the conversation with the commission to say, well, what's the right number this year? Where do you guys want to go?
Heidi?
Are we working towards having in the reserve the 15 to 18%? Is that what we're working towards forward?
Right.
Because there's a lot of money in the reserves.
Well, yeah.
And I'm hoping that's what we're working towards, moving forward.
Yeah, I think we were trying to look at what is still there in the unassigned after we look at the reserves. If we want to start adding reserves in the unassigned, then we can easily look at that percentage as well. Connie might have more clarification.
Connie?
I think part of what we were using those unassigned funds for last year over on the general side, remember, we put in the wage compensation contingency. This is
but-
really the first year we've had this with the water and sewer department. And I think that was part of why we wanted an extra cushion in there, and we were trying to hold the rates steady.
Yeah, I think it was more about the rates, because by the time we set the water and sewer budget, we knew the wage compensation results. So I think at this time it was more, what can we do to use some of this money that we know is building and have some relief on rates?
Kara?
I think to address like what Heidi's trying to say, what Angela's trying to say, I think that what you have the ability to do is use some of those reserve funds for the purpose of some of the improvements that are going to be needed based on the 20-year study and based on the lack of maintenance and the emergency things that you already have done. So you're already doing some in 2023. You're using funds that weren't already budgeted.
Mhm.
Right, because you're getting things fixed. I think in FY24, you need to address many more maintenance things, including putting a meter on your septage and replacing all the different things that Stevens mentioned earlier. And I think that gives you the ability to use some of those reserves and feed it back into the FY24 budget, because you don't need as much as you have while looking at your capital plan. Like, what did you plan on purchasing in FY24, FY25, FY26? I'm just saying, I think that's where the missing piece is here, is you have the ability to use any of those reserve funds to help with the improvements that are needed desperately in 2024, and to put some in to address the 20-year study information that's going to come back with, should we repipe where these two pipes come in so that we can put meters on both pipes, those kinds of things. So I really recommend you look at what you've already put into FY24 and potentially increase it by pulling more out of the reserves to address major issues that you have to do in 24. Rather than increase rates. I mean, you can even reduce rates if you've been able to bank so much over these years and you're not using it. And if it's not in the capital plan to be used in the next so many years.
Do we have any estimates yet on what the 20-year upgrade will cost?
Well, it's 154 for the study. I don't know what they're going to recommend as far as replacement of actual infrastructure. We
Well,
won't.
we know that 30 to 50 for the influent pumps, and that's a must do.
Yeah.
That's just a minimum, that's just, hopefully by October, we will have a way forward on that. Other than that, well, we don't.
I mean,
And
more
I-
heavily on the sewer,
Okay,
the
go
water,
ahead.
the wastewater side than the water side. I mean,
Yes.
we all can see by the numbers, you got 800,000 almost in wastewater reserves and two something in.
The water system is pretty,
Right.
I mean.
Pretty good.
So we're really talking one side.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not time to ask this, but I see that where we're talking about the different percent, like how much the rates are changing in FY 23 to 24. And like the fixed rate for residential is only going up 0.4%, but it's going up 4.4 for commercial and government and 3.6 for the school. Where do those numbers come from? And why is it not just like a universal I'm not saying it should be, but like, I'm just wondering how you figure out how those percentages.
It's percentages on resource allocation. So business uses so much percent, so their base rate is so much percent. Josh walked through the actual numbers a few minutes ago.
I just wonder why it's increasing. Okay, I think I'm kind of getting it. It's based on how much they're using is why it's going up a different percent.
Yeah, and that's where, so yeah, like you'll see on residential. Like our change is 0.4% on the fixed rate. And that's just sort of the way that the usage in the math worked out, like we weren't targeting anything. Whereas on this school, they're going up 3.6% on the fixed rate because of the way the mix is for what they're getting charged at. And then the 50-50 split there.
And I assume that the bigger percent difference for the sewer has to do with the fact that everything is inflation for all the treatments and the chemicals.
Yeah, and I think if you go back up that, so that budget in general, like the budget for water is going up 2.7%. And on the sewer side,
The 10.
right now, it's more
11%.
closer to 11%. And it's back to the chemicals and things like that that are increasing, and the cost of the hauling and disposal.
And these are just the known costs. There are also, we know there are unknown costs, which are going to be significant as well.
You're hard.
A snapshot of how much unassigned funds you've had left over each year for the last 5 years to know, because you really should be going for a zero budget. Like you want to bring in as much revenue as you're spending, so you're not banking a bunch of money that you don't know what you're going to do with.
Yeah.
You're purposely putting some in your reserves, and that's what you should be actually banking. But do you have a snapshot of the past 5 years to know how much you might have been overcharging or work that you were underdoing, whichever way you want to look at it?
Look at it as work we are underdoing.
How much you're saving by not doing the work you're supposed to be doing, however you
Yeah.
want to say it. Do you have a snapshot of each year for the past 5 years so that you can see your
Yeah.
trend? And if your trend is to have $200,000 left over a year, then you can potentially not raise your rates this year.
Yeah, and we did have that, and we do, let me try that again. We did have that based on the fact that we started doing this with the auditors a few years ago. What I would want to do is, now that we see what our new auditors, a much more simple,
Formula.
a much simpler way to look at it. I think we could go back, and that wouldn't take long at all to look back at the last 5 years of audits and pull those numbers out
Formulas.
and figure that out.
Beautiful.
Because I think that's a good way to go. And I was gonna try to do a quick experiment, but let me see.
And I'm only
Hey,
bringing this up-
Josh, that
Yeah.
number is right in each audit.
Right,
That
well,
was
that's,
that page 23 of the audit.
then we just have to subtract out our 3 reserve funds / savings accounts from each of those to then get to our true unassigned.
Correct.
And so we just, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think with what Ron told us last week, we could do that in 15 minutes. We just have to pull the audits out, go through and get it done.
And the only reason I'm saying this is because you guys are the highest rate in the state of Vermont, and I'm trying to just help figure out how to make it more affordable for people.
Yeah, I want to just.
I'm just gonna throw this into the monkey wrench. The fact that your water meters. There's a large percentage of your water meters that have been in since 1970. And I was told when I took a class put on by Champlain Water District, every 20 years, you need to change your meters. Because they wear out.
So it's not they either work or don't work. They deviate from
and
accuracy.
Champlain Water District, every meter they change, they test, bench test. A 20-year meter, they are now on a 15-year schedule. A 20-year meter is off 10 to 25% to the customer's favor.
Hmm.
And some of your meters are 1940. I mean, you've been in for 40 years.
Yeah, 50 years,
Okay.
So
Let me-
you're
50 plus years.
you're gonna, I really believe you're gonna see an increase in water usage. If we just do nothing more than change the meter.
Probably no.
Or decrease in our water rate per gallon.
Well,
is what you're saying.
Yeah, because
Not if you set it before you change the meters.
Yeah, but I mean, if
Yeah.
you're off, then it shows you're using more water and therefore our rate will actually go down.
the costs stay the same, but the
But it's
the
not,
metered usage would go up.
right, but I mean, it's still the same dollar because we're comparing what does it cost to operate versus what are we setting our rates at? So I mean, the only thing that's changing is we will then know what the accurate rate is.
Yeah.
And it doesn't get back to, should we lower what we're charging everybody?
but it also goes to the fact that you don't meter your septage.
Right.
You use the water meter. So it throws everything off
Yeah.
if it's off by 20%,
That's true.
or even if conservative 10%. If every meter or half of your meters are off by 10%. That, that adds up.
Right.
Connie?
I mean, when we did enter the meter reads each quarter, because we have such a horribly manual system, we did watch every single account that we were entering to see if there was there a dip in usage? Was there an increase in usage? We would put notations on the bill. But that was something that we did watch to make sure if there was a drop, we wanted to know why. The first thing that we would do while we were entering the meters would have somebody from the plant go back to that location and read the meter again to make sure there wasn't a typo. So although I agree with what Steve is saying in regard to 10%, but if it was something bigger than that, we would have been picking up on the change of usage each quarter.
Yeah, I think Steve's point is over 50 years, a 10% drift won't be noticed on a quarterly input.
Yeah, let me,
Well, the system monitors the software when we put in this quarter. It keeps track of their average over all the years.
Right, but if they've been off for 10 years.
So what I'm saying, Connie, is when Champlain Water District changes a meter, they take that meter and they bench test it. They actually run a set number of gallons through it, say 100 gallons, and see what the meter read. And most generally, it's off by 10% is what they say, and they have seen it as high as 25%.
And that's what I'm saying. 10% we wouldn't recognize, but a
Right.
sudden 25% we certainly would.
Well, you
But-
would over 600, the users, the
Right.
equivalent of the amount of users you would be.
And that is based, they're doing it on a 20-year complete switch out. We have meters that are,
50 years old.
yeah.
so as we're talking about how much unassigned to add, I just did a quick update of the sheet. And this is always a little dangerous doing like live updating in a meeting. So I'm gonna preface it with, if I come back next week and like, wait a minute. But what I did for a quick look was said, okay, what if we used, and let me make this bigger because I know it loses formatting here. Okay. So I looked and said, what if we added 100,000 in unassigned fund balance on the water side? And the numbers, the sort of rough numbers we looked at earlier, was we had 217,000 if everything comes in on budget. So that would leave us with 117,000 at the end of the year, which is more than 15%, which is about 61,000. If we look at the wastewater side and we did 150, and again, we had about 330. So 150 would bring us down a little above 150 or so at the end of the year, probably closer to 180. So again, above that 15%. And I just sort of tried to pick some large numbers that seem like they might work. Where does that get us with rates? So if you look at the water side, we would be seeing a reduction in rates of 20%, give or take, on all accounts. And in the wastewater, we're at even to about a 7 or 8% decrease. And again, remember, they were in the 20% increase range. So it's going to be harder to get that down. But just trying to look at some big numbers to say, where would we maybe get to if we were more aggressive with unassigned funds? That's one model where we could be.
For using them to reduce rate.
Correct,
Mhm.
yeah, and
Well, it's technically not reduced purpose to reducing rates. It's doing some work that you had planned on doing and using those funds to do so. And the net result is reducing the rate. But that wasn't the intent originally.
Right, but I mean, you plug that number in to see, we've got monies in our savings account. Let's plug them in here, which reduces the rate, yeah,
so we wouldn't use that money would not be used to buy anything. That would just be saying we have this money on hand after we look at our reserve funds. This would still leave us with more than 15% of the budget on hand. Assuming everything again came in on budget for 23. I think we'd still be in okay position.
Heidi?
To do, and looking at exactly what you looked at, the plan of these are the crucial things we need this year. And putting those numbers in and seeing where are we still close? We're getting closer to that 15% where technically I personally. We all discussed the 15 to 18%. Steve, I said 18%. Alan, I told you 18%. I'd be happy with that. But we need to get this number down compared to where we're at.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just quick time check. We've got 25 minutes left and we've got about 50 minutes worth of agenda.
Yeah, we should try to move on. But I think, yeah, so I mean, we can come back and look at this in the next meeting. We still have one more meeting before we kind of get to our annual meeting. And even if we get to annual meeting, I remember a year we got to annual meeting. It didn't set rates that night because we still had a little bit more work to do. So I think we've got some work. We can look at some better projections. And I think we can come back with some better numbers. Yeah.
I think the first thing, and this is just my personal, putting in what the guys need at the plant first.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Yeah.
and then working back of where we would be with the rates.
Yeah.
Getting close to, and again, I'm even saying 18%, give them some wiggle room. You know, Connie, I know you're a little bit nervous about getting down lower, but this is what we have to be doing, 15 to 18%.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, we ready to move on?
Connie has her
Yes.
hand.
Oh, go ahead, Connie. Thank you.
Just want to throw this idea out. I don't know if it has been, but it's always seemed weird to me as to when we change the rates.
That's the next agenda.
It'd be nice if you had the same rate for the whole fiscal year instead of crossing fiscal years.
That's literally the next agenda item, Connie.
Oh, okay.
Moving on.
Thank you for the intro.
Discussion of when to implement fiscal year 24 water and sewer rates.
Okay, so as Connie was saying, it's been the practice for I'm not sure how many years that the rate is set in May and then that is applied to usage in April, May, and June when the bills go out in July. So technically, the fiscal year 24 rate is first used on usage in fiscal year 23. And that never made full sense to me.
Me.
And I think it might be worth looking at to see, do we want to change that and say the
We
fiscal
still
year.
said it at the annual meeting.
You
in
still
May.
said it, but then the fiscal rate,
Effective July 1.
well, effective for usage on July 1.
Right.
Yeah, because we have a 3-month lag, but I think the water you use in the fiscal year probably should be billed at fiscal year.
Right, I agree completely.
Not
I've
what you hear
bitched
about.
about this multiple times.
Good.
Yeah.
I have, pardon me, but it annoys me no end that we're saying this rate will go into effect July 1, we're billing you for it now.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
never made me sense.
Are we ready to move on?
And we can make that final call in annual meeting, but it sounds like the will of the board is going that way. That makes sense
Yeah.
to me.
We just gained 3 minutes.
Working on it. We'll get there. Follow up on transferring water and wastewater allocation. This one's going to take some time.
May not. So at the last meeting, Dan Noyes came to us with a request to transfer his water and wastewater allocation from the current market to the new market, with the idea that the new business going into the current market location is going to use less water and wastewater, and he'd like to not pay for excess allocation. There's pretty clear guidance in the sewer ordinance that you can do that as a commission. You can transfer allocation for sewer between two properties that are owned by the same owner. However, the water ordinance is silent on that topic. So the attorney kind of gave us two paths. One, you could just do it and set a precedent and kind of pay the price in the future. Or the more conservative way to do it would be make a change to the water ordinance, which would then allow for the commission to have the authority to do that. And so the quick way is the more risky way. The change to the ordinance would probably takes a few months by the time we get the wording, warn the hearing, and then there's at least a 45-day waiting period afterwards until it goes into effect. But if you'd like to see some ordinance language, we can come back to the next meeting with potential ordinance change.
I feel we should go the ordinance route.
Yeah, I agree.
If we want to, if that would be very cumbersome for Dan, one of the options we had was, we'll just do it anyway instead of precedent. We could set the precedent for Dan, but then make it official by doing the ordinance. I mean, we could do kind of a hybrid approach. I would, if he can wait though, I think we should go the ordinance route.
I think we have time to do the
Yeah,
ordinance.
I mean, how quick does he? I mean, what's fair as far as getting back to him on them?
Yeah, I emailed him with the update on what we're doing. I haven't heard back from him on like his time frame. But I mean, the new market isn't being built tomorrow. So I think
Yeah,
there's
they
some
haven't built
time
it
to
yet.
kind of, I think there's some time. Without hearing from Dan, it seems like there's a little bit of time to make
So
that happen.
3 months, maybe if you went the ordinance route to get that changed.
Yeah, I don't think that would be inordinately put him back.
But let's just go that way.
Is one of them you can do, like water you can do and sewer you can't, or
Vice
vice
versa.
By the
versa?
way,
Yeah.
You can do sewer, but you can't do water yet?
water's absent.
So would you do one now for him? Maybe that'll
Yeah.
help him?
No, you haven't actually transferred yet, but.
But we said
If
we
you
would.
can't get any water, you can't use the sewer.
At least
Oh, Steven.
it's a good
He
faith
doesn't
effort.
do one, but you can show good faith that
Yeah.
you're doing something for him.
Okay, we're ready to move on.
Yes.
Consideration of approval of extending the residual management service agreement with Casella Organics for an additional 5 years beyond the current expiration date of January 31st, 2024.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve extending the residual management service agreement with Casella Organics for an additional 5 years beyond the current expiration date of January 31, 2024.
Thank you. Moved by Jay, seconded by Morgan. Any further discussion? Hearing none, calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Jay,
Or-
aye.
Morgan, I.
Aaron, I.
David, I motion carries. Moving on, we're moving now. Review of list of water and wastewater items to be repaired or replaced.
Well, we did.
We can cross the steps off the list.
Steps are done. We have the influent pump in, that's been working great. Friday, we got the brand new backwash pump. We're now up to both filter tanks. So we can operate the plant pretty much bar any other problems that arise as it should be.
We've come very far in a few weeks.
Yeah. The backwash pump was the last key thing, so.
Mhm.
Right now. We can operate and safely and not worry about, I mean, we have 2 influent pumps. We have 1 humongous pump which can take care of all the flow. But. So really, our goal is to keep the plant operating, keep the water flowing. Get this 20-year
Right.
study done. We need to get that done to know where we're going.
Right, some of the bigger ticket items, like the air handling system, the quote from the Avanda
Yeah.
is pretty high, but we can't not do it.
Right.
I mean, there are some things, I mean, that people come into the plant and they're like, if you look at the Avanda air handling, he's like, that building isn't up to code on anything. I mean, for that type of environment.
Right.
You know, with the doors all open like it is right now with it, yeah, I mean, it's okay. But I mean, when all winter, it was not right.
But mainly methane or CO2 or
Ammonia,
ammonia.
it's ammonia gas in there.
Heidi?
I just want to say what a great job the department as a team working
No.
together. Very, very
Yeah.
impressive how quick
And
you guys
we're-
did this.
We're very glad that we've gotten some support.
And we're very glad that you came to us.
Um. It was that around this time. I hate to say it because.
Yeah.
But yeah, things are moving forward. We're getting a lot of things, taken care of that we can. The big thing now is we're trying to get into some preventative maintenance that hasn't been done, like flushing hydrants. Marking curb stops and stuff, not just for the construction, so that we actually know where they are.
Yeah.
We have a major problem with Boardman Street. They have a valve, they had a failure there. They went and shut their valves off, which were supposed to, shut them off. Their valves failed. We've spent almost 2 months now looking for our valve. We can't find it. We've had rural water come in with their line tracers. They can't find it. We've tried to schedule, they're gonna come back with ground penetrating radar. But
We're going back to the 1990s. That's not a long time ago.
no, but we've got to do something, because, I mean, they're a customer and they want us to shut their water off so they can fix something, and we've put them off for 2 months now. So that's, that's just one of the things that
Yeah.
we've got to deal with.
When you say you're marking these things, do you mark them like with GPS?
Actually, well, we're right now, we're just trying to find them.
Then we can mark them.
And then, but you would be very surprised to find out that with not all the upgrades, but a lot of the upgrades, the contractors were told to take out, like when they replaced curb stops, take out the old curb stop. They didn't. They're still there. So when we go out and try to locate these things, we end up finding 3 or 4 curb stops that are no longer usable.
Mhm.
And then we have to trace and find the other ones and stuff. So that just takes time.
Mhm.
And, it's not just as simple. One of the things that, I mean, we talked to different towns and stuff, and Heinsberg has gone, they don't bring all their curb stops to the surface, like a lot of the ones in Richmond, but they've gone to using a fiberglass marking for so that they know where they are in case of an emergency. And one thing that I'm a big fan of is making sure all your valves come through the pavement.
Mhm.
Here in Richmond, some of them don't, the one on Portland Street. But we're almost to the point. I've got a meeting with Tyler. He might have some engineering plans, but there was a no man's land down there that isn't technically town road. And the valve is somewhere in the middle of that.
And the engineering plan will only show you where it should be.
Yeah. I mean, we've gone down with metal detectors and spent several hours. We found in the middle of the pavement, we got a good hit where we thought it was, dug it up, it was a radial tire. Right in the middle, just under the pavement landing. The other one was a boundary marker sunk into the road. It was a 3/4 inch water pipe, but it was not the
Yeah.
valve that we were looking for. So those are just some of the things that we're trying to get out and start doing some maintenance and stuff. Now that the plant, we can leave it without.
Worrying that it's gonna blow up.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Update on Gateway Expansion Project.
The land trust was meeting last Thursday to discuss Bombardier Meadow and the easement that would allow us to continue the line on past the reefs. Haven't heard back from them, so I just sent Jeremy Hoff at the land trust a note saying any update. My guess is the reason we haven't heard back is because the Bombardier Meadow discussions could have taken up the entire meeting.
Yeah, okay. Discussion of bids for water meter replacement.
So we got 4 bids, 4 bids.
4 or 5. Yeah, I don't know.
Obviously, we haven't done a lot with them yet. We did get 4 or 5 bids back. We've assembled the bid tab, which we put into the packet. And the pricing gets somewhat complicated on different options. So I know that you guys are looking through to kind of determine the lowest cost. And then we'll do some due diligence on, does that meet our needs and what will that cost be? So
Were
we
all
should
those
be
bids
back
in
shortly.
compliance?
With how we wanted them back, yeah,
Yeah.
everybody had a good bid. We just need to go through, I think, and
I think
figure
there
out.
was 4, but I think EJP gave you 2.
Right.
They gave
That's
an,
where you're making.
over there two bids from
Yeah.
GP.
Yeah.
I was a little startled when I looked at the one from Zenner, their cost for the hardware and software is 3 times the others.
Right, and that's where we have to go through in a little more detail, right? EJP did give us two, because they give us the 2 different styles, the enhanced, right? And I haven't spent really any time with this. Duncan put this together for us to try to give us a look at the bid prices. And now we need to go
Yeah,
through
we
in more
haven't
detail and
really-
figure out.
I mean, we perused through them a little, but we
Right.
haven't
But
actually.
cost wise, the 2 EGP ones are almost penny to penny the same cost. So it's really just what features do they have?
So yeah, more to come on that.
And I think no matter what we do, there's going to be savings to the town, not only from our end, but from Connie's end where she gets software.
Yeah, I couldn't get my file to open up. Okay. Review of monthly water data for March.
So this is our new template that the state wants to see based on the sanitary survey. So we are now giving them the meter reading, the gallons produced per day of water, the fluoride level, the entry point chlorine, and the finished pH. These 3, I believe, these are all taken at the Waterhouse tap, correct, Steve? After it's pumped, after it's treated, after it goes through the chlorine contact time.
Further, John, because, Josh, because
And then we have the system free CO2, which is at the end of the line.
There's no alarming out there.
those are for March.
Yes.
Yeah, these go into March. These are the numbers that
From February 31st onward.
February 31st.
February 31st.
State could- Yeah, I mean,
There's only one, there's one that is that.
I want to know who was at the switch between February 28th and February 31st.
So this is the data for March.
The old way you used to do things, okay? It's the old way.
With these 3 all being taken at the Waterhouse, and then this is the one that they wanted us to take for, I think, until the end of June, at the end of the line of the wastewater tap, to measure the chlorine at the end of the system.
hold on.
Well, one says entry point, so yes.
Yeah. But they changed where it's measured.
I'm gonna have to review this because the free in the system, and maybe Alan can, because he compiled this. I don't recognize this stuff, really.
Okay, this is the data that he came to me.
I mean, I know where we're taking the
Yeah,
samples from now. I mean, we are still doing them at the Waterhouse.
and then he's keeping that as a separate sheet of backup that you guys use for guidance.
I mean, and at the Waterhouse, we are specifically taking them post-treatment. And that includes the contact chamber for the
Right.
chlorine,
Yep.
but it's pre-distribution.
That's these 3 points here,
Yeah.
fluoride, chlorine entry, pH. And then this one is the one that's taken at wastewater treatment for free chlorine after it has gone through the whole system and at the endpoint in the tap. That was,
If that's what Alan.
that's what,
Yes.
that's what Alan gave me. Yep.
My understanding was that the state didn't really want, or I mean, they
End of
don't,
the line chlorine.
yeah,
Yeah, so they asked us to report
Okay.
that until I think the end of June.
okay.
And so we had several emails back and forth with, I'm forgetting his name from the state about.
Matt,
Yeah, Matt, is this what you want? Is this the format you
Okay.
wanted in?
All right.
He liked this, so this is what we're giving him. And maybe you and Alan talk offline to make sure that, assuming the numbers are right,
Yeah, I
and
mean,
maybe
Alan
compare it to
Trying
what
to
you got. But
because, I mean.
Yeah, Alan.
Yep, you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, those are the numbers off the sheet of where the state wanted them. So
Okay.
normally the fluoride number is rounded to the first digit, not the second. So
But
Which-
they want them like that.
they want the fluoride in one digit. They want the pH like that, and then the 2 digits for the chlorine because they want to make sure the chlorine, they will like it above at minimal free in the system at the end point over 0.1 minimum, 0.10 minimum.
The system free chlorine, that's the one from the treatment plant?
Mhm.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so those numbers are.
I think, with the exception of a couple of days where we were a 100th of a point behind or so.
And well,
Chlorine.
we're adapting and we're changing the way we
It
mix
happens.
batches.
Yeah.
So we are eliminating that now.
Yeah, and I think you guys are, I mean, I'm not too worried about a day or two that far
No,
below.
we're not even-
I think we're doing really good. We're in the acceptable range on the average at the end. It's looking good.
Morgan?
Shouldn't the entry point chlorine always be higher than the free chlorine?
Wondering that.
Alan, is the entry point the total or is it the free entry?
That's the free.
Okay,
They didn't want the total number, amazingly. They just
That's what I
wanted the
thought.
free number.
so the entry point free. They're both free numbers. They're not total numbers. So they will
It's gonna
be,
get used up a bit in the system.
Hey,
gets used, chlorine gets used.
Right, they're different, but shouldn't entry be always a higher number than the free?
Not necessarily. Because you could have. It's, our system is really hard to explain because. We could be putting water one day right up into the tank.
Yeah.
But that same water coming back,
It's already chlorinated.
yeah,
And then you're adding chlorine to that?
Right.
no, but we're adding more chlorinated water to it, so
Right.
it breaks down over time. So if we've got water, high usage days, you'll see that the chlorine is higher because we put in we put in more fresh chlorine into the system. As over time, it sets in your tank, it breaks down.
Right,
And then, you get a low usage day. Well, the pump didn't come on for very long and then it's mostly tank water that's coming back down the hill. You only have one supply line to your tank. And that's also a distribution line in reverse. So it's not just one line that goes up to the tank and then that comes down and feeds the town. It's a line, so you have fresh chlorine in the system one day that is being used if you have a high usage day. Or it could be going to the tank that day because the tank,
okay.
it's complicated and
Right.
it took me a long time to fathom that the supply line is your distribution line.
Right.
And because the pump is down here and your tank is up there. That's how the chlorine breaks down over time.
Okay, moving on.
Table the grant.
Got like 2 minutes.
Yeah,
Table that till next time.
Yeah.
It's urgent.
approval of minutes, warrants and purchase
Move to
orders.
accept the warrants for the previous meeting.
I second.
Motion made to approve the warrants by Jay, seconded by Aaron. All of those, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Jane,
Or-
aye.
Morgan, I.
Aaron, I.
David, I. Warrants are approved. We do have a few purchase orders.
That was the minute.
Oh, that was the minutes.
Move to accept the warrant.
Okay, sorry about that.
Second, the exception of warrants.
Okay, so Jay's moving to accept the warrants now.
Mhm.
Okay. And Aaron seconded.
I did.
So calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Jane, aye.
Aaron, I.
Morgan, I.
And David, aye.
And
So
we
now
have
the
one-
warrants and the minutes have been approved. So moving on to the purchase orders.
Yeah. All right, we have purchase order number 4602 to M&T Bank for the East Main Street loan, $25,139.95.
Move to accept that.
This is a motion to approve purchase order 4602 in an amount not to exceed $25,139.95. And this is for the East Main Street Water Line Project. So a motion made by Jay,
I second.
seconded by Aaron. Calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Jay, aye.
Aaron, I.
Morgan, I.
David, I. Purchase order 4602 has been approved. Moving on to purchase order 4603. This is to Union Bank for the water tank gap loan in an amount not to exceed
Sorry, I've updated the total.
25,857 plus
Yeah.
1,410.93.
Somebody make a motion?
Move to accept that.
I second.
It's 27,267.93. It didn't get totaled on the one that got scanned.
Okay, motion made by Jay, seconded by Aaron. Total amount not to exceed 27,267.93. Calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Jay, aye.
Aaron, I.
Morgan, I.
And David, I. Motion carries. Next, we have purchase order 4593 to M&T Bank. And this is the Millet Street.
So this one is combined, part of it's highway, part of it's water and sewer. The water and sewer portion is $14,092.53. The total amount of the loan is $21,138.80, but part of that will be paid back by highway fund.
So we're just moving $14,092.53.
Sure.
Move to accept that.
Second.
Made by Jay, seconded by Aaron. Calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Jay, aye.
Aaron, I.
Morgan, I.
And David, I. Okay. In the interest of time, I think at this point, I am going to call for a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Morgan, I.
Aaron, I.
Jay, aye.
And David, I. We are adjourned.
Sure.
Thank you,
Before you guys
everybody.
go,